Hey folks, it's the Red, and welcome to another Red-trospective review. Yeah, been a little while since the last time I did one of these, but hey, I've got a good reason for making this one. It's 2019 as of making this video, and we've got two big racing games coming out this year, with Team Sonic Racing and CTR Nitro Fueled, and it's gotten me to thinking about kart racers again. So I figured I would reflect on the era that really got me into the genre, and that happens to be where some of the best kart racers came out, the 5th generation of consoles. Now, there are any number of kart racing games that came out around the time of the N64 and the PS1, so many in fact that I'd be here all day trying to name them all. So I'm focusing on the three that I think we can all agree were the big hitter titles of the generation: Mario Kart 64, Diddy Kong Racing, and Crash Team Racing. Three of the finest kart racers to grace the gaming world. Back then, these were mind-blowingly fun to play, and still hold up well today. Before we begin comparing these titles, though, I'd like to take a more in-depth look at each game. Looking at each game chronologically, let's start with Mario Kart 64, which came out for the N64 in 1996, surprisingly in the same year as Super Mario 64. It is the second game in its series, succeeding the Super Nintendo's Super Mario Kart, a game which was, perhaps, just a little ahead of its time. As the Mario series is known for doing, it set the standard for how kart racing should be handled, with its detailed tracks, item system, and driving physics that would help pave the way for other racers to come. Like pretty much every other Mario Kart game, you have a single-player Grand Prix mode and time trials, and some multiplayer racing and battle options. There's no overarching story in the game, which is fine by me because it's a kart racer. Spin-off games like this don't need to have a story to be good. It's all about that gameplay, and it certainly does get the job done. Controlling the karts feels a bit slippery, but not as bad as the previous game, and it's easy enough to adjust to. The early tracks like Luigi's Circuit and Moo Moo Farms even give you wide open space to adjust and figure out how hard you'll need to turn to make some of the tighter turns in later tracks. I like that the track design is well thought out for things like that. The tracks overall are well designed, and each character has a track themed after them. Though a lot of the tracks are just traditional race tracks, you'll find yourself racing through many different places like deserts, jungles, and castles. The item system is very traditional. You drive into an item box, a random item is given to you, and you use it by pressing Z. Many of the traditional Mario Kart items are found here, such as banana peels, shells, mushrooms, lightning, and, as it so happens, this game is the birthplace of the dreaded blue shell. Since then, it has become customary to include some kind of item that affects the first-place driver specifically. So, yeah, you have Mario Kart 64 to thank for that. The game also has a drifting system where you can do a power slide, then wiggle the control stick left and right to make the E's following your kart change color. When you let go of the slide, you'll hear your character saying their boosting line, and your kart supposedly goes faster. Woohoo! It's not that visually apparent that you are gaining any additional speed by doing this, at least not like it does in later games. I never really feel like I'm gaining any speed, so I typically don't bother with it. Presentation-wise, the tracks all look great, and almost all of them feel unique without too much recycling of ideas. It's also got some of the most memorable music tracks in the series, composed by Kenta Nagata, and believe it or not, this was the first game he composed music for. I have to say, for his first game, he sure did deliver some hit tracks. Kenta would go on to compose for many other franchises, so needless to say, he's the real deal. So yeah, it might be a little rough around the edges, but Mario Kart 64 is still a game I enjoy coming back to from time to time, and is not a game to be overlooked among kart racing fans. Next up, we have Diddy Kong Racing, released in 1997 for the N64. This one is a cult classic, and for good reason. It's a fantastic racer that not only has you driving in karts, but also in hovercrafts and planes. It's three unique playstyles, but none of them really feel out of place in the game. Now, right off the bat, I have to get something out of the way. As much as I like this game, it's undeniable to me that this game feels very young. On its surface, it feels like it was designed for young children. The giggling kids at the title screen don't help with that. And neither do the many characters in this game, who all look and sound so cute and happy. Generally, I don't have a problem with a setting like this, but it's a lot more noticeable in Diddy Kong Racing. It's almost as cutesy as Yoshi's Story. But make no mistake, you'll soon learn that this game is much more than it looks on the surface. Unlike Mario Kart 64, this game was designed with more of a single-player element in mind, by bringing in a full-fledged adventure mode to the game, with a story to follow and everything. Now, even though I said that a racing game doesn't need to have a story to be good, that doesn't mean this game is wrong for including one. At the end of the day, it's not like it's anything huge anyway. We have this big bad pig wizard named Whiz-Pig who wants to destroy the island, so Diddy Kong and his friends have to stop him by racing him, because that makes sense. Anyway, the main campaign has you traveling around the 4 hub worlds looking for golden balloons which will allow you to progress through the game, not unlike Mario 64's Power Stars or Banjo-Kazooie's Jiggies. Golden balloons open up new tracks which, after you win a race on them, allow you to play those tracks in multiplayer. When you clear all the races in a hub area, you race against a boss, then you go back to those tracks you just completed to do a silver coin challenge, where you have to collect all 8 silver coins on the track and win the race. Then you have a rematch with the boss, who then gives you a piece of Whiz-Pig's amulet needed to face the final boss. Yeah, this game will keep you busy for a while. Not just with how much you have to do, but because of the sheer difficulty of the game. I mean, geez, some of these races are just plain tough to win. It's important to find a character you are comfortable with because you need to bring your A game if you intend to 100% the game. As far as gameplay, all the vehicles available control really well. The karts are still kinda slidey, like in Mario Kart, but not as bad as in that game. The hovercraft is a little tricky to get used to, but I think that's part of its gimmick. The plane isn't as fast as the other vehicles, but is more versatile and can do tricks to avoid attacks and such. None of the vehicles seem particularly broken and offer a lot of variety to the gameplay. Items are distributed more controllably, unlike most kart racers, which give you a random item when you hit an item box. Diddy Kong Racing distributes items via colored balloons, and you'll get the same item every time you break a certain balloon. The red one always gives you rockets, the blue one always gives you boosts, the green one always gives traps. Furthermore, items can be upgraded by driving into the same colored balloon, up to 3 levels for stronger effects. This takes out a lot of the random element from the game, which could be viewed favorably by more competitive players. Additionally, there are bananas scattered around on the track, and you can grab up to 10 of these to make your vehicle go a little faster. This seems to be a carryover from Super Mario Kart, and its coin system. There's no drift boost system for this game, though you can still make hard turns by holding the R button. The tracks all follow specific themes, so there isn't as much variety, and a lot of them are pretty short, so an average race will usually be finished in under 2 minutes. Some of the later tracks get a little longer, but not by much. Once you unlock the tracks in adventure mode, you'll be able to race them in multiplayer, and for most tracks you can use any combination of vehicles in the same race. It really makes for some interesting gameplay. There are also a few battle modes to mix things up a bit. For the game's presentation, the tracks are very colorful and vibrant, and track design is pretty good as well. The early tracks are short and simple, and they get progressively more complex as the game goes on. And the music! Oh man, the music! The composer for this game is none other than the great David Wise, the man behind the soundtracks of the Donkey Kong Country series, and he delivers another astonishing soundtrack for this game as well. Overall, this is an excellent package. Beneath its cutesy exterior is a very tough racing game that will put your driving skills to the test. But if you're looking for a more relaxed experience, try rounding up some friends and have a few rounds in multiplayer. This is one that's definitely worth looking at. Finally, we have Crash Team Racing, or CTR for short, released almost 2 years later in 1999 for the PlayStation 1. If you'd like a more in-depth analysis of the game, I covered it in my Crash series review some years back, but I'll do a quick breakdown here too. CTR was the last Crash game developed by series founders Naughty Dog, and a follow-up to their critically acclaimed PS1 trilogy of platformers. What's interesting to note is that this game borrows a lot conceptually from Diddy Kong Racing in terms of game mechanics and design, right down to recreating one of its tracks from Diddy Kong Racing, Crescent Island, and reworking it into what we now know as Crash Cove. On its surface, Crash and his friends, and foes, get together for some races, until an alien shows up and challenges the fastest driver to a race for the fate of the planet. Yeah, this game has a story mode very similar to Diddy Kong Racing, complete with collectibles on each track, boss races, and cutscenes. Though once again, the story is not the focus, but rather the adventure itself. You visit each track, collect the trophies, race a boss, and get their key. Once you have all 4 keys, you race the last boss to complete the game. Pretty standard fare if you've played the last game, though this adventure feels a little shorter than the last game, and not nearly as hard either. Not to worry though, because there are more collectibles to be had beyond the initial trophies and keys you collect, so you'll have plenty to do even after the final boss is beaten. And then of course, you can replay the tracks with your friends in Versus or Arcade, and all the main tracks are available out of the box. There are still a few that need to be unlocked through Adventure Mode though, as well as additional battle tracks and characters. The control of the karts is fantastic here. With nice and tight controls, they don't feel at all too slidey when making a basic turn. Even characters with low turning stats can make corners fairly well with decent power slide timing. And speaking of sliding, drift boosts are in this game, and they are handled quite nicely as well. When you slide around a corner, you watch a little meter fill up, and when it turns red, you hit L1 or R1 and you do a boost, up to 3 times per slide. A skilled player could wait until just before it fills up all the way for bigger boosts as well. I really like how the drift boosting system is handled in this game. And what would a kart racer be without its items? There's plenty of variety here as well, with bowling bombs, missiles, boosts, and potions, just to name a few. These items can also be powered up by collecting Wumpa fruit that lay around on the track. The more fruit you collect, the faster your kart will go. And getting 10 fruits will power up your items. The tracks you race on have some nice variety to them as well. Every character in this game has a track themed after them, and many of the tracks in this game follow the theme of levels that Crash goes to in the platform games, such as temples and laboratories, but also some unique locations such as mines and canyons. The difficulty curve among the tracks doesn't seem as steep in this game though. The first tier of tracks is simple enough, but after that the tracks get a little trickier, but none of them really feel harder than the rest. As for presentation, it looks great. Despite being on a technically weaker platform than the N64, the models are all well constructed and colorful, and the textures make the tracks look very lively. Series composer Josh Mansell returns to deliver the soundtrack for CTR, and it's pretty solid. But overall, it's got the same Crash beat that we've come to expect from the series, but with more of a racing vibe to it. It reflects the areas you're in, and really gets you into the racing spirit, so it's another winning soundtrack in my book. Overall, we have ourselves another excellent racing game with plenty of content for both single and multiplayer. With highly satisfying tracks and mechanics, it definitely deserves a spot on the top of the kart racing food chain. So there you have it, the 3 best kart racers of the 5th generation. But which one is the best of the bunch? For this comparison, I'm going to be looking at a few aspects of each game: the controls, the tracks, the game modes, graphics, and music. Just remember, this is all personal opinion, and your mileage may vary on some of these categories. So starting off with the core gameplay and controls. Right off the bat, I'm going to say that I don't like how slidey the karts feel in Mario Kart. Making turns feels somewhat awkward when it looks like they are turning harder than they actually are. It tends to make me over-anticipate when to do a power slide, and I often wind up going off-road because of it. Hopping helps to correct this, though. I suppose the tighter turning makes the game more accessible to casual players, since basic turning is usually enough to make pretty much any corner in the game. As I had previously stated, drift boosting feels largely ineffective in this game, and, combined with the tight cornering the karts like to do while power sliding, tends to lead to risky situations for minimal gains. I definitely like the boosting system in later games a lot better, but this first iteration of it is a little rough. Diddy Kong Racing's karts aren't quite as slidey, but when you press R you can use a handbrake to help make tight corners more easily. You can also couple this with the brake button to make super tight turns. I definitely like the control of the car best, and the planes play considerably well too. They have other moves like barrel rolls and loop-de-loops, but I've never really found much use for those in a race. Then there's the hovercraft. Man, it's like driving on ice. Thankfully, most tracks you use it in are pretty wide, so it still controls decently. But making tight corners with this seems to almost slow me to a stop. I'm not a fan of this vehicle and tend to avoid it whenever possible. So while Diddy Kong Racing doesn't have a drift boost system, it does offer some strategic elements, such as letting go of the gas button when you drive over a zipper for a bigger boost than what you'd normally get. It's not as exciting as drift boosting, but it's something. CTR definitely has my favorite control setup of the bunch. The karts feel very natural when you turn, and often you will encounter places where you will have to do power slides to make a corner that would be too tight for regular turning. Sliding feels a lot better in this game, though more costly if you wind up going into a wall or something. The drift boost system, I think, is much better here as well. It's a little tricky at first, but when you get the hang of it, the boosts feel very rewarding to pull off in a race, and skillful players can use this to maintain boost speed for almost the entire race. So for this category, I pick CTR for best controls, followed by Diddy Kong Racing. Sorry Mario Kart, but the sliding controls were just too much of a turn-off for me. Next up, the tracks. Mario Kart 64's tracks are divided into 4 cups: Mushroom, Flower, Star, and Special. Each series features progressively tougher tracks. Well, for the most part. The Mushroom Cup features simple track designs without too many hazards to worry about, while the Special Cup really puts your driving skills to the test. The tracks are really thoughtfully designed, with the early tracks like Luigi's Circuit and Moo Moo Farms giving you plenty of room to maneuver, while the tougher tracks like Frape Snowland and Royal Raceway have sharper turns, encouraging you to learn about sliding and drift boosting so that you can compete more effectively on those tracks. There's plenty of variety in the types of tracks as well, including deserts, icelands, highways, ghost houses, and many more. Overall, this is a pretty solid lineup of track selections, the only problem being that out of the 3 games we are looking at, this one has the fewest of the bunch at 16. Another little issue is that some of these tracks, like Wario Stadium and Rainbow Road, have a tendency to overstay their welcome. Diddy Kong Racing has decent tracks, with 4 tracks dedicated to each of its 5 worlds, but I do have a few problems with them. For one thing, I feel like the harder tracks hit you a bit sooner than they did in Mario Kart 64. Tracks like Walrus Cove and Snowball Valley I found to be a bit difficult to stay ahead in due to the track layout, and that can be said for a lot of the game's tracks outside of Dino Domain. It may take a few races before you can become accustomed to the design of the tracks. Another problem with a lot of these tracks is that they seem pretty short. Most tracks feature lap times around 30 seconds. The races are kind of short, so you won't have a lot of time to catch up if you fall behind. Lastly, the themes. There are 5 worlds in the game, and sadly, there are only 5 themes in which the tracks are designed after. A dinosaur world, an ice world, a beach world, a medieval world, and a space world. All the tracks follow these themes, so there's not a whole lot of visual variety to be found here. There is, however, 20 tracks in this game, which is the most of the 3. There are also 6 boss races which all take place on their own tracks, so if you count those, then it's 26 tracks in the game. CTR is the middle-of-the-road type here. There are 4 cups in the game: Wumpa, Crystal, Nitro, and Crash, with each one containing 4 tracks from each world you visit in the adventure mode. There's also 2 other tracks which can't be raced in arcade mode, but it brings the total track count for CTR to 18. I feel like the tracks in CTR are a bit better thought out, as the early tracks are easy enough to race on, with later tracks getting progressively more challenging, but the difficulty doesn't spike quite like how it does in Diddy Kong Racing. There are some hairpin turns that will ask the player to learn techniques like power sliding so they can handle tracks like Papu's Pyramid or Cortex Castle better, but I don't feel like the track design is quite as difficult as it is in Diddy Kong Racing. The variety in tracks is okay. You'll be racing in popular crash locales such as beaches, sewers, temples, laboratories, and many more. The variety is good, but I feel like Mario Kart had slightly better variety due to only recycling 1 theme from that game, whereas CTR recycled a few. CTR is also guilty of having a few tracks that go on a little too long, like Tiny Arena and Cortex Castle. All in all, when it comes to track design, Mario Kart 64 takes the top spot here, closely followed by CTR. I don't hate Diddy Kong Racing's track design, I just find it a little cumbersome racing on some of these tracks. Now for the game modes. Mario Kart 64 doesn't have a whole lot to bring to the table for this category. There is the Grand Prix mode, which 1 or 2 players can participate in, time trials for a single player, and versus mode that any number of players can participate in. There's also a battle mode containing 4 arenas for 2 or more players to play balloon battle in. The lineup is kind of basic, but for a casual party game, this is all you could really ask for. It's simple and to the point. Diddy Kong Racing has about the same offerings, though how you access them will not be immediately apparent. The main menu only has two modes, Adventure and Tracks. Choosing Tracks will allow you to have a versus race or a trophy race with your friends, though you will have to unlock all the tracks and trophy races in the Adventure mode before you can play them in multiplayer, as well as the 4 battle arenas. Unlike Mario Kart 64, not all the battle arenas are for traditional hit-your-opponents-to-win style. One of these arenas has the players collecting eggs and flying them back to their nests and keeping opponents away from them until they hatch. Another arena has players collecting bananas and storing them in a chest before their opponents can do the same. These are interesting ideas, though I wish they weren't restricted to specific maps. CTR has these game modes as well, and just as accessible as in Mario Kart. Versus mode lets you race with your friends in a single race, and you can even adjust how many laps you race for, a feature that's not found even in recent Mario Kart games. The arcade mode is a cup race that up to 4 people can participate in. Time trials let you race against your ghost, or, if you're fast enough, an entropy ghost. The battle mode is pretty unique here as well. You can play in a standard free-for-all stock lives battle, or try to hit your opponents a certain number of times to win. Team battles are also available here. What's more, if you have everything unlocked, there are 9 battle courses you can play on, the most out of any of the games. So while they all seem to offer the same game modes, it pretty much comes down to accessibility. But I like that CTR has more options for its game modes, as well as being a little more organized than the other games. Mario Kart 64 does a decent job of this as well, so I would place that in second. Finding your way through Diddy Kong Racing's versus modes is simple enough, but some of its other game modes seem to require a little more digging than I think should be necessary. Plus the lack of proper battle modes hurts it a little. Now for the graphics, and this is going to be a tough one to judge for because Mario Kart 64 and Diddy Kong Racing, being on 64-bit systems, have a technical advantage over CTR due to being on the 32-bit PlayStation 1. But let's just keep that in mind as we go forward and be aware of those technical limitations. All of the visuals in Mario Kart 64 are nice and clean, no matter how far away from them you are, so you'll never have a problem anticipating what's coming up. It's very clear where you're supposed to be driving, and the environments look very good as well, with some of my favorite examples being Toad's Turnpike, Yoshi's Valley, and Rainbow Road. The drivers are not proper 3D models, but rather 2D sprites that are designed to pose in a certain way when they are facing a specific angle from the camera. An odd choice, but I can roll with it. Overall, I'd say that the graphics deliver quite well here, with colorful worlds and great draw distance, but despite this, the tracks are not all that interesting to look at, consisting mostly of walls and generic background objects. Still, it gets the job done and I don't hate it. Diddy Kong Racing largely looks pretty good as well. The graphics are bright and colorful and the various locales are interesting to look at. I especially like how tracks like Frosty Village, Crescent Island, and Greenwood Village came out. These places feel like they have a lot of personality to them. The drivers themselves are fully rendered 3D models, but if I had to nitpick at them, their models look a little flat. But that could be chalked up to the fact that it's still early 3D. Overall, another solid N64 graphic style. Looking over at CTR, the visuals here are surprisingly good. While not as colorful as the other two, the somewhat murkier colors work better here because of the themes of the tracks, such as in Papu's Pyramid and Engine's Lab. It is also colorful when it's appropriate, like in Coco Park. The drivers are fully rendered 3D models, and I feel like they are pretty well detailed in this game. See, the characters in Mario Kart 64 use sprites, and you can only see the upper halves of the characters in Diddy Kong Racing. But here we have a full body shot of each of the characters, and they all look very nice. The tracks have a decent amount of detail to them as well, from the waterfalls in Papu's Pyramid to the torches in Tiger Temple. Even some of the background detail in Sewer Speedway is well designed. This is certainly one of the better looking kart racers out there, but between the two, I have to give the edge to Diddy Kong Racing. The level of personality is overflowing with this game, but CTR is not to be underestimated either, and that's why I place it in second. I do like the themes of Mario Kart 64, but I would have liked to see a little more detail in its tracks. Finally, we come to the music, and oh boy do we have some hits in these games. Mario Kart 64 is home to some of the best tracks in its series. But don't take my word for it, have a listen for yourself. And of course, we can't talk about Mario Kart 64's soundtrack without bringing up not just the best song in Mario Kart, but one of the best songs in all of gaming. Indeed, this is an excellent soundtrack, but some of the music does wind up getting recycled into other tracks, and since Mario Kart has the fewest tracks of the three, there's not a big variety of music, but what's there is really good. Still, let's not forget about the legendary composer David Wise scoring for Diddy Kong Racing, and there's no shortage of great songs here either. I could be here all day naming off all the songs in this game I like, because I like almost all of them. And every track features a unique music track, so you've got lots of variety to look forward to as well. CTR, well, I will say that it fits its themes very well, but certainly there is a good handful of catchy music to be heard in this game as well. I guess my only real problem with the music in this game is the lack of instrumentation. While it suits Crash well and has better melodies than, say, Crash 1, it doesn't really jump out at me like the other two did. Still, at least it also has unique music for all of its tracks. Well, except for Turbo Track and Slide Coliseum. So for best music, it's a tough call to make, but I'm giving the edge to Diddy Kong Racing simply due to the amount of great songs in it, with Mario Kart 64 close behind. It's not that I don't like CTR's music, I just like the other two better. And so, as our final result, it would appear that CTR has eked out its competition. But really, when I look at a chart like this, it's a virtual tie in my eyes. As I said at the beginning, your mileage may vary, and this is just how I view each game. Perhaps you like the tracks in one game over another, or how the music is in one game over another. These games are at such a slim margin that any little change in opinion could shift the tides. But again, that's just my views. What do you think of my list? Which of these kart racers is your favorite? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time!